All right, everybody, we're going to get going on this webinar. It's the 2025 Interagency WFDSS Administrator webinar. Thanks for everybody joining us. Just so you guys know, if we do have folks that can't get on here because we've reached our cap, the webinar will be recorded and then posted to the Wildfire Learning Portal at a later time, so that anybody can go back in there and watch it. Let's go to the next slide, Morgan. Like I said, my name is Casey Shedden. I'm part of the RD&A group. We put on the WFDSS applications as well as some other stuff. I wanted to get in some logistics before we get going on this webinar. Mainly on how to use Zoom. It's been a while for some of you folks. Let's go to the next slide. If you look on the bottom right of your screen, that's where you can put your questions. Any questions you have, reply to everyone. That way we can kind of answer as we go, because that question you have is probably going to be a question that other folks have as well. We're going to be covering a lot of new stuff with the new NextGen WFDSS, so please put those in there. If it's something that's super technical, we'll try to answer that as we go. We also have a Q&A section at the end of the webinar, but we're going to reiterate throughout this webinar this year that where to find these resources that you have, these questions. So don't think that we're ignoring you on some of our questions, but we're just going to keep track of those as we go. I'm going to kick it over to Morgan.
Okay, I'm going to cover a little bit more about how to get the certificate from the Learning Portal, because we know a number of you will have this need. So what you will do is you'll finish watching the webinar that we have here, or for the people that cannot make it live, you will watch the recording of the webinar, which we will post as soon as we can after this concludes to the website that I'm going to put in the chat, and we will also post it to the Learning Portal. So there'll be two ways to watch the video. After you finish watching the webinar, you will go to the Learning Portal and you will self-enroll in the course that's named Agency Administrator WFDSS Refresher Webinar 2025. I will put a link in the chat here in a minute with that. If you can't remember the name of what I just said, if you just search on WFDSS, there's only a handful that come up, including last year's. So make sure you click on the one that says 2025, not 2024. And if you don't have a Learning Portal account, when you get to the Learning Portal, you will be prompted to create one. So you'll create one, you will self-enroll in this class. And then after you watch the video, there is a feedback survey that is very short. You will answer 3 questions in this survey. And after you do that, that is what unlocks the certificate that will have your name on it that you attended. And that is a certificate you can turn in to your training officer if you need it. Again, as soon as I finish speaking here, I'll put links in the chat for the Learning Portal and where we'll post the recording. I'm also going to cover the agenda here, which I'm going to share, and I will put a link to this in the chat. So we're at the logistics section. As soon as I finish up here, we're going to turn it over to Ed Hunter and Jason Fallon to give you a leader's intent and expectations from the agencies. Then we'll move to Sam Amato, who will cover NextGen WFDSS Rollout, and Sarah Sinowick, who will talk about how to get help. We'll take a short break, and then we'll move ahead with the major differences between NextGen and Classic WFDSS. Wes Hall will cover spatial fire planning, and then we'll head it back to Sam to cover a high-level overview of the sections that are in WFDSS NextGen. We'll close out with a quick summary of ISAP and WFDSS and what the AAs need to know, and then we'll have a short Q&A section at the end. Okay, I'm going to introduce the cadre here, who you'll be hearing from. Casey Shedden was the person who opened up the call. We'll have Sam Amato, Rick Mowry, myself, Morgan Pence, Wes Hall, Sarah Senowick, all of those folks work for the Wildland Fire Management RD&A, and we're hosting it here in coordination with Jason Fallon from the Park Service and Ed Hunter, from the Forest Service. And with that, I'm going to welcome Ed Hunter and Jason Fallon. Ed is the Forest Service Deputy Regional Forester for the Southern Region. He is the National Line Officer Team Chair and co-lead of the National Fire Leadership Council. And from the Park Service, we have Jason Fallon, who is the Wildland Fire Branch Chief. Thank you both for helping kick off the webinar. And I'm going to turn it over to Ed to start us off with the leader's intent.
All right, thank you, Morgan, and welcome everyone again. Good morning, good afternoon, depending on where you are. So as agency administrators, we're responsible for managing some of the most breathtaking landscapes in the U.S. Oftentimes, these features that make those landscapes beautiful also make them complex. These complexities in the fire environment are becoming more prevalent, and I would say the same for our work environment. And once we layer in socio-political, tribal, and budget constraints, your ability to safely manage an incident can be quite challenging. The concept of wildfire seasons has also evolved due to changes in our weather patterns and the natural environment. And we now manage fire years, a stitching together of traditional fire seasons across all regions across the country. So the need to manage fatigue in your resources, but also in you, is critical to our well-being. And I know this goes without saying, but change can be an agent of stress, and many may be feeling additional stressors they haven't experienced in the past, or to the degree that they do. It's even more important now to look out for one another. It's also important to focus on your staff and workload and ignore additional noise in the system, whenever possible, to ensure safety of the public and our employees. With this in mind, we've adjusted how we manage risk to include how we configure incident management teams. Next slide, please. Federal fire teams have fully transitioned to complex incident management teams, expanding the range of complexities our fire teams manage, providing more depth and coverage, but also requiring more agility in those teams to manage a larger range of complexities. The NWCG Wildland Fire Risk and Complexity Assessment was updated last June, accounting for CIMT in the organization assessment and folding in the incident complexity level determination as well. And you will hear more about the risk and complexity assessment components in our WFDSS presentation later. The main thing I want to highlight here is these assessments are an important part of the decision-making process. I know many of you lie awake at night, as I do, thinking about what can be done to minimize the intensity and scale of the wildfires we manage. And so, what's the old saying? An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. That's what comes to mind for me when I think of the agency strategy for addressing the growing complexity and severity of wildfires. Next slide, please. The Forest Service's Wildfire Crisis Strategy was first released in 2021 and was recently updated at the beginning of the calendar year. By most accounts, we've made good progress as we enter the fourth year of addressing the ongoing wildfire crisis. In fiscal year 2024, we treated approximately 804,000 acres across 21 priority landscapes, surpassing 2023 accomplishments. Overall, investments have been made in 1.86 million acres since 2022, and that work has resulted in reduced wildfire risk to $700 billion worth of housing and critical infrastructure, including 550 at-risk communities, 2,500 miles of high voltage transmission lines, and 1,800 watersheds that provide drinking water. As we continue to make progress on the wildfire crisis strategy, we'll continue to experience and manage large wildfires. There's no doubt about that. Each of you play a critical role in our agency's success. So it's incumbent upon us to maintain our qualifications and seek opportunities to enhance them. For Forest Service agency administrators to remain qualified as a WFA 1, 2, or 3, we must remember to take the recurring training as outlined in the 2025 Fed Supplement. As of January, less than 40% of Forest Service AAs met qualification standards. This webinar is a recurring training that is currently needed by many of our Forest Service agency administrators. So I sincerely appreciate you all for your attendance today, and thank you for making this a priority. A200 and A314 are two other recurring courses that most Forest Service AAs need. There are others, so I encourage you to work with your regional and forest training specialists to identify the courses that are required for you to maintain or obtain your qualifications. And lastly, as a reminder, Deputy Chief Crockett gave Forest Service agency administrators a 3-month extension of time to complete required recurring training. That extension ends March 31st, end of this month. So let's continue to make progress. Again, thank you all for joining us today. And now I will turn it over to Jason for additional comments.
Thank you. And thanks for having me here today. I really enjoy getting a chance to work with agency administrators, even in remote sessions like this, to really get to the context and the why some of these things are important. I've been lucky enough in my career to work for multiple land management agencies. And while I'm here from the Park Service to help with the DOI perspective, I've really learned that it doesn't matter if you're a forest supervisor, a district manager from the BLM, a superintendent, a refuge manager, list goes on, that a lot of these things are applicable across all the agencies. And while we do have some policy nuance differences between us, the general why WFDSS is pretty much aligned. It's an excellent tool for agency administrators to start to bring multiple things together. It really is designed to go through a risk-informed decision process. And I think that's really important. As people, it's often easy to slip into like rationalizing our decisions after we've made them, rather than really relying on subject matter experts and evidence to come to an informed decision from the beginning. And that's a really important distinction for us, given all those changes that were just discussed and the changing and adapting environment that we have. So it's a great way to start to bring together land and resource management plans and direction, to pull in wonderfully backed scientific modeling, bring in those critical values to make sure that we're looking at all of those sorts of things, and then all these other additional risk-related data. I think going into that and ensuring the decisions are published in a timely way and shared is really important, because it helps convey that decision process and that intent from the agency administrators. And every time I've seen that work on the fire environment, it really does help in getting to implementing what is desired, what is that best decision for that circumstance. We have a lot of other tools out there, whether that's ISAP or RMA dashboard to help inform that. And any of those things that are being used should really be brought into that WFDSS decision so that it's documented. And the importance of that is really because it does become a legal document that stipulates the decision, especially on federal incidents or federal parts of incidents. As somebody who's worked with a lot of agency administrators over time to help with that, and kind of even gone into the process of coordinating down the road with DOJ when unexpected things come up, really having that decision process and all that informative information outlined so that it's traceable to how you got there or how you adapted over time as agency administrator in charge is really important. It helps delineate that discretionary function part of your job. This is the information we had, and this is why we made that decision. And that can become critically important when the unexpected happens and people start to kind of retrospectively look back and go, well, why didn't you see this coming? And having that documented and showing that you were utilizing really excellent tools, whether that's everything from the longer term modeling to the short term modeling or the critical values that were out there. That all helps. And in addition to that, putting the effort in to make sure that things like critical value sets, all that data that goes into the background to document that, it helps because it reaches out into a further network to help inform that decision in many ways. So really spending the time to work through that decision process right up front and document it is really helpful for agency administrators to make sure you're looking at all those angles, relying on subject matter experts to really push that into and inform the decision, and making sure you have a legal document that you can refer back to address those changes over time. I think as we get to that timeliness, it can be a lot of information. So finding those experts to help move those decisions forward quickly is really important, as well as those pre-planning efforts to have that data, as I spoke of, put into there. And it just is a ripple effect. Good evidence-informed decisions it supplies a good rationale is highly important. So thank you for giving me a little bit of time. Morgan, I don't know if we had any questions or if we're ready to move on, or Casey.
I don't see anything. If you guys want, I have about 9 minutes. So if anybody has any questions for Ed or Jason, Ed. I don't see any questions. So move on to the next presenter. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, thanks
Thank you.
for sharing with us, Jason and Ed. We really appreciate it. Before I turn it over to Sam, I want to acknowledge that we have lots of people reaching out in chats and emails and in the chat of this Zoom meeting. We know the limit was reached. It's not something we can up. We apologize for that. We will have the webinar recording posted as soon as we possibly can after this call. I will repost the location here where it will be posted, and it will also be in the learning portal. So if you have coworkers who are reaching out that they can't get in, please help us share the message that we'll get it posted here soon. They can watch that and get their certificate just the same as if they were on live. And I'll turn it over to you, Sam, now to talk about the NextGen WFDSS.
Okay. Thanks, Morgan. So we'll dive right in. I'm going to go pretty quickly, and then we'll try and save some time for questions at the end. So the new WFDSS, we've got a couple bullets here. I'm just going to hit the high points. WFDSS NextGen, we've really focused on bringing in a lot of data services. So we have a lot of the feature service layers, well, national feature data sets that we had in WFDSS Classic. But the difference being that we're bringing those in on a service. They're not loaded into WFDSS. So the good thing about that is that it's authoritative data. So you're getting the most up-to-date data from those services as possible. But the con on that is that sometimes those services go down. We do have some errors set up in the layer tree so that you'll know when those services are down. Another pro is we were able to bring in things from other services like RMA, FEMS, Landfire. So we have a ton of data sets, over 140 data layers in the map for you to use. And I would encourage you to click through those and explore those. In fact, we just brought in a layer from the Lesson Learn Center with, incidents from vehicle accidents, aircraft incidents. So there's a ton of information to explore, safety, infrastructure, values, and I would encourage you to poke around in training and explore that. Some of the other things here, Spatial Fire Planning Service has been broken out of WFDSS NextGen. That data used to be incorporated into WFDSS Classic. That's a separate application now called the Spatial Fire Planning Service. and then we ingest that service so that you can still have your land and resource management plan information, direction and policy in the system, but it gives the units the ability to update their data almost on the fly. And we also integrated some ISAP. It's optional at this point, the parts of ISAP that you want to incorporate. Mainly, we have critical values at risk as an additional option for your objectives and requirements. And we'll see that later on. Okay. Oh, one last thing. FEMS, before we go to the next one, Morgan. FEMS is the replacement for WIMS, so that's how we're going to be bringing in weather. And I will say, for the first iteration of WFDS NextGen, really the only place you're going to see FEMS interaction is for FS Pro, but we are planning to expand that to bring in some weather in other parts of the application. Sorry, Morgan, go ahead. Okay, so the rollout plan, timing, March 26th is the official launch of WFDS NextGen. And we are going live whether there's a government shutdown or not. There will be, while there is the ability to practice right now in EDU, GAEs are in there getting set up. So you can do your role requests through them. If you can't get a hold of your GAE, you can reach out to the RD&A and we can give you access. And the way that's going to work is if you don't have prod roll right away, that's by design. We want everyone to be viewers on production until March 26th, so that no one accidentally initiates an incident and causes some unintended consequences with Irwin. When we do get close to March 26th, what we're going to do is reach out to incidents that have ongoing decisions, and we will get their data manually moved over to the production system, and that'll primarily be a WFM RD&A task. So we'll reach directly out to those incidents. We'll get them moved over. We've already started reaching out to GAEs to see if there are any incidents they know will need to be transitioned to the new system. And then incidents that are not active will be archived with the legacy data. I'm going to pause right there and just give you guys the opportunity to ask any quick questions on transition because it's a big topic. Okay, I don't see any hands or anything, so I think we can go on, Morgan. Okay, so this is where you are going to access WFDS NextGen. It's where you also access WFDS Classic. So if you go to FAMAuth and authenticate either through the login.gov route or the government route where you can use your PIV card, once you are in, you'll see a few tiles. I'm not sure. Do we have a slide with the tiles, Morgan? Yeah, we do. If there's no demarcation of what environment you're in, that's the prod environment. So WFDS NextGen is the orange flame gradient there, and there's only one production link there. We have 3 development environments, and really the only development environment that this group needs to be concerned about is WFDS NextGen EDU. That's the replacement for WFDS Classic training. So that's the one you want to request roles for, and your GAEs can help you get set up in there. For creating incidents in there, right now what we're doing is you request those incidents in, or set those incidents up in WFDS Classic, and we will push them over to WFDS NextGen for you. Or if there's an Irwin point, so a fire that's not contained, controlled, or out in the last 6 months, you can start a decision on any of those. Okay. Okay, so roles. most people on this call are going to fall into the editor role. So we really only have 5 roles in WFDS NextGen, and each role builds on each other. The initial role that everyone will be given in the system is the viewer role. If you get access to the system as a viewer, the only thing you will be able to see is your profile, which that little arrow there with the little person in the upper right-hand corner, that'll take you to your profile, and you'll be able to see your role underneath the placeholder we have there for a profile picture. It should say Incident Editor, and then if you are going to be approving decisions, which I assume you are since you're on this call, you're going to need to self-certify as an approver. Oops. That's the little checkbox above the circle there. By certifying yourself as an approver, that makes you able to be added as an approver on a decision. If someone can't add you as an approver, odds are you haven't self-certified. The other thing you can access from that profile picture is a list of your geographic area editors, so that if you need to elevate your role, you know who to contact. So if you see that your system role is viewer, you're going to want to get a hold of your geographic area editor. Okay, go ahead, Morgan. Okay, so how to request a different role? You'll do that through your profile in FAMOTH. Click on your little profile picture in the upper right-hand corner, and you want to request your role to either EDU or prod, and you're going to want the editor role. For prod, you won't get that editor role again until we go live on March 26th. So don't be worried about it. It's just we're keeping everyone as viewers until March 26th, and then your GAE can adjust your role. Okay. So the historical decisions and analysis are what we'll often refer to on these calls as legacy data. So Classic WFDSS post NextGen launch is going to be read only. And you can log in and view and download anything in WFDSS Classic. But as far as decisions, you won't be able to do anything new in WFDSS Classic after March 26th. Everything's going to be read-only. And then in late June, we're going to be turning WFDSS Classic off. And so all published decisions will be archived, and those will be accessible in WFDSS NextGen. And they'll be available for download along with analyses, relative risk, and org assessments that were published. And then Classic training is going to remain online through April to support S495, and after that, training will be going away. If you have any incidents that you accidentally did something for in training, please contact a geographic area editor so we can make sure we get that elevated back up here to the RD&A and get those incidents locked so we can get that data archived for you. Okay, so user support. This is a Sarah topic,
we're gonna switch to
off.
Sarah. Yeah.
I
see.
Oh, you got that question, Megan or Morgan?
I see a couple questions in the chat about self-certifying and AAs. We have a couple slides coming up here that cover that. So one of us will probably also answer in the chat, but for those that are wondering the same thing, we have more coming here that will address that. I am going to turn it over to Sarah, who will talk about how to get help when you're this summer or when you're trying to train. Go ahead, Sarah.
Hello, good morning, good afternoon. I'm Sarah, and I know that you're all here to find out how to get more help. So we've got several different levels about how to get support with training in the NextGen and support for active fires. So we have here help content, videos, tutorials to kind of self-service. And then for the next step up, local and geographic area editor support. Then the IIA help desk. So the interagency incident. Oh, I forgot what that one was. Wait, it's in a slide. I've got it.
It's application.
Thank you.
Interagency Incident Application Help Desk.
Thank you. And then there's all of us here at the WFM RD&A. You can switch slides. Thank you. So here, this is an image of our WFDSS help. Woo, Morgan. Thank you. So on the left here, this is our WFDSS homepage, and anywhere in the WFDSS application that you see that flame icon in the upper right, upper left, that will take you to our homepage, and we'll also drop in the link to our homepage, and that's where our help content is located, as well as our user guide and links to some important features like our WFDSS tutorial videos, the agency administrator resources that we host on the RD&A website, as well as just reading through the notes, ways to get user support, like report bugs and things like that. And so here on the right-hand side is a quick clip of our tutorial videos, and those are hosted on YouTube. And we've got several short videos that, 2 to 3 minutes that are just focused on help topics. And then we've got some longer ones focused on things like status updates. This is also, we have office hours every week where we talk about one subject and then have open question and answer period. And those are also going to be posted on that website. So finding your GAE, that's something that Sam just talked about. And so we have a really short video right there, less than a minute and a half to help folks figure out how to find their GAE and what to do with that. Next, please. So here is how to get that GAE support. So we're working up from the self-service, the things that you can do yourself, to kind of go a little more broad and locate your geographic area editors. And so these are folks that have agreed to take on additional responsibilities related to WFDSS. They don't just approve role requests, but they also coordinate and help manage wildfire and decision support needs. They're really great help to assist you with agency policy questions like decision support, as well as just making sure that your accounts are updated. So these folks are learning along with all of us the new system, and so they have been, we've been bringing them along probably for the last year, and so they've gotten the first peeks into the system, but they'll be seeing it all come together along with you. So Sam showed in the application on one of his slides, this upper right-hand corner, if you have either the viewer or editor role, you can click on that icon and pull up the geographic area editor staff report. The staff report then can be like sorted by name, geographic area, or agency pair. And then that gives you their phone number and their email address to be able to contact them directly. Next. So here is the Interagency Incident Application Help Desk. So the help desk provides level 1 support for a lot of the wildland fire applications, and they are available 24/7, 7 days a week. And you can contact them through email, chat, or through those phone numbers. They will be the folks that if you can't seem to get your rule requests sorted out, they'll be able to tell you what the status of those requests are. And they might should be able to help you with the FAMOF application in and of itself. They won't be able to approve any of the requests, but they'll help you be able to find your geographic area editor if you're struggling. If it's something that is an issue or a bug, you can report that to the IIA help desk, and then they'll push that up to tier 2, which would be the RD&A staff. So really over time, they're going to be providing support that is a little more simplified than what they were able to do with the Classic application. But they also deal with a lot of the connected systems that WFDSS uses, and that will be a place they can help you understand whether or not the connected applications are working properly or things like that. So be sure to let them know where you're having problems within the application. And I think I have one more. So getting user support for the general application or incident-specific decision support. So as we move forward, we have teamed up with the remote incident support team to help us manage this transition. And so this form, users can submit this form either for application help or incident-specific decision support as we go into the transition. That'll let us know that there's folks out there that need something, and we'll be paired up and have this order filled. And I think that's it. We'll also have on-call coverage. So you can continue to use the on-call phone number for WFDSS if you've got it programmed into your phone, and that will come straight to whoever's on call.
Thank you, Sarah. I see we had a question in the chat. Just wanted to speak to it in case others aren't monitoring the chat, because I suspect many of you have the same question. It was touched on self-certifying and approving. We have a couple slides coming up in the next section that talk about what does that mean? How do I self-certify? And that it isn't connected to an IQCS qualification. So you should see that here soon. We do have a 5-minute scheduled break that we were going to take between the next two sections. We're running a little bit ahead, but I think we should go ahead and take that break, and we'll, because we might need that time later if a section goes longer, and we can continue to monitor the chat here, but let's go ahead and take a 5-minute break. Actually, let's do it a tad more. So let's start back up at 15 after whatever hour you are in. So that's like a 7-minute break. Thank you. Okay, I have 15 after the hour, so let's go ahead and resume. I just wanted to remind too, because we continue to get people asking if they can get into the meeting, so we will get this recording posted as soon as we can at the conclusion of this call, so that those that couldn't attend because we reached the limit can watch it and still get the certificate if they need it from the learning portal. The next section we have talks about the major changes between Classic WFDSS and NextGen WFDSS, and part of this we'll talk about that self-certification for approvers that we had the question on. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Rick Mowry, and please go ahead.
Thank you, Morgan. Okay, so as Morgan said, we're going to cover a couple of things. We're going to talk about some of the big differences you'll see in approach between the classic or current version of WFDSS and NextGen WFDSS. And we'll also try and set some expectations for the season as part of this as well. So Morgan, would you go ahead and next slide, please? Okay, so the first thing that you will notice as a difference in approach is the way that you find your incidents in NextGen. In NextGen, the search is very much map-based. When you open the application and go to the Incidents tab, you'll see a map. We'll probably default to seeing the entire country. And you'll see a list of incidents on the right-hand panel. It's important to know that while you can search in the right-hand panel for a particular incident, if you type in the name of an incident, it will display it there, but it will only display it in the right-hand panel if it is in your current map view. If you look at the picture on the screen, it's sort of zoomed into Washington, Oregon, and Idaho. If you were to enter in the right-hand panel there the name of a fire in South Carolina, you will not see it. So again, what's on the right side is constrained by what you have displayed in the map. So the incidents that show up on your map will be incidents that started within the last 6 months, that are wildfire incidents that are not contained, controlled, or out. I believe Sam hit on that as well during his presentation. If you look at the entire country, you will have quite a few incidents show up on the right side. There are several thousand today, and it will probably be necessary for you to find an incident on your unit to go ahead and zoom into your unit or use the search feature. Once you have actually found an incident, next slide, please. There are several ways that we make it easier to get back to that same incident, however. So one is if you go to the, once you have found an incident on your map, you select it in your right-hand panel to see the incident details, you'll see a little icon of an eye next to the word details. You can see highlighted with a red arrow on this slide. Clicking that icon will add the incident to your incident watch list. So for you, this will appear on your My Home tab, and it will be a list of all of the incidents where you have clicked that icon so that you are able to navigate back to them fairly rapidly from your My Home tab. Go ahead and next slide, please. The other thing you'll find on your My Home tab is a section called My Active Incidents. This will be a list of all of the incidents to which you have been added as a collaborator. And we'll talk about collaborators on an incident next. But this is another quick list of incidents on your My Home tab that you can use to navigate back to an incident that you have already been dealing. Next slide, please. Okay, so let's talk about collaboration on an incident. Those of you familiar with the current or classic version of WFDSS, you recall that incidents had incident owners. Those owners control who could be added to the incident as an editor or as an approver or a reviewer. This concept in NextGen we call collaborators. And it's similar to, but a little bit different from how it worked in Classic. So in order to be a collaborator on an incident, you do have to have at least the editor role. If you are just a viewer, you will not even be able to see incidents, let alone be added as a collaborator in NextGen. Once you've located an incident that you're going to be working on, if you are the first person to access that incident and start working on it in WFDSS NextGen, you'll see a Start Decision button on your incident details page. If someone else has already started it, you'll see a decision button where you can go to the incident content. But someone has to start that process out. Whoever presses that Start Decision button will be designated as the point of contact, or POC, collaborator for the incident. That can be changed after after the decision work on the incident is actually started. In WFDS NextGen, any collaborator on an incident can add other collaborators to the incident, can remove collaborators from the incident, can change who the point of contact person for the incident is, and can designate approvers for the incident. Now, as an agency administrator, you might be the person that is starting the decision and adding collaborators, or it could be someone else on your staff that's already done so and has added you to the incident. So we had several questions about the agency administrator self-certification. Go ahead and go to the next slide, please. So you may have seen on that collaborator tab that there were some checkboxes for POC, point of contact, or approver. In order to be added as an approver, as well as a collaborator on an incident, you will first have to go to your own profile and self-certify that you are an approver. So we'll step through the steps here real quick and then talk some about what it might mean for different folks. So this is a quick 3-step process. If you go to your profile icon, or the person icon in the upper right corner of the NextGen screen, click that. You'll see a menu. The top option is View Profile. That will let you get into view and change your own profile. On your profile, just below the big blue square, there's a checkbox that says Approver. If you check that, it will pop up a little dialog box that asks you to verify that you've completed whatever training your agency requires, and that you are indeed the person responsible for reviewing decision content, writing a rationale, and approving decisions for your agency. As far as what that means for you is somewhat up to you. WFDS is not going to track any certification or training for agency administrators, nor track policy for what various agencies require of their agency administrators. Certifying this is on you. So if you are, I would maybe throw the guideline out that if something goes wrong on an incident and a review comes back and asks, were you actually authorized to make decisions for this incident? If you can answer that yes, I would self-certify as an approver. If you do not think that you have the authority from your agency or employer to make decisions for wildfires on their jurisdiction, don't check the box. That's as much as we can give you as far as guidance. This is very much going to be a self-certifying process. We will track who has approved decisions, but we will not track the requirements for what it takes to do so. And as a final note on this, this would be something very good to do before fire season on your respective units. Okay, next slide, please. So back on the collaborators tab, once you've completed those 3 steps in your profile, any other collaborator on the incident can designate you as an approver, or you can designate yourself as an approver for an incident. Okay, next slide, please. So Sam hit on this a bit, and I'll reiterate that one of the big differences between NextGen WFDSS and Classic WFDSS is the use of services to bring in data from other sources. So current WFDSS very much is a siloed application. As an example, to bring in data from land fire for fire modeling, we get a copy of land fire data sent to us by the land fire team. They transfer it to us. We put it through some processing. We load it in various environments. We finally get it out to the field in production, and usually that's anywhere from 2 to 6 months after it was available from the land fire team. And that has in the past resulted in a lag time, as new information is available in some places, but not in WFDS. For NextGen, we are pulling that information directly from the Landfire product service, which means the very day that Landfire makes that available through that service, it is available to users in WFDS. As Sam brought up, there are some pros and cons to that. It means that we are much more responsive and rapid about getting new information out to the field. However, if there are problems with those services that we bring data from, they will not be available in WFDS. We are better connected, but that does mean that we are more reliant on other systems. To try and mitigate that, we have established and will keep on improving our coordination and communication with the teams that manage the other systems that we touch. Okay. Next slide, please. Okay, want to shift gears a little bit and set some expectations for this season. The theme for WFDS for this year is very much going to be transition. And anyone who works with fire knows that transition is a watch out. Transition times are when things fall through the cracks and when our operational safety nets are maybe not as effective as they are at other times. But transition is also something that we train for. We manage the risks that come with transition by keeping up our situational awareness and by increasing our communication. Toward that end, there are a number of features that we are still developing for NextGen and which will not be there at launch. If you only looked at WFDS a few times this season, it may look slightly different every time you log in. This application is definitely still being built. There are some advantages and disadvantages to that. We continue to develop on it, which means that we are still very much looking for feedback on what people want to see in the application, and we are still able to make changes to try and accommodate those. But it also does mean that not every feature that we know is important to WFDS is going to be ready there on March 26th. So we're going to look at a few items that will not be there on launch day, but we have in the development hopper and should be coming shortly after. And as part of this, we also want to make sure that you know how to give us feedback and actually monitor what's going on with the application. Okay, thank you. So want folks to keep in mind that Classic WFDSS, we started development on it about 2005, 2006. And when it launched in 2009, it still didn't have all of the components it does now. And that will also be true for NextGen WFDSS. So to look at some of the things that won't be there on launch day, first thing I have on the list here is legacy data access. And that is, when I say legacy data, that's information that was made in Classic WFDSS. So previous published decisions and analyses, things that you might want to reference when you have a new fire on your unit, and which we plan to make available for download through NextGen. However, that process is going to take some time. After launch, there will be several months where we are packaging up all of the data out of Classic WFDSS and getting that into a form where you can find it from NextGen and download it from there as well. But again, that will not be there at launch. Second bullet here is maybe one particularly pertinent to this group, and that is that we won't have the ability to have multiple approvers approve a decision in NextGen at launch. And here's what I mean by that. Any number of collaborators can be added as approvers in NextGen. However, where Classic, when you had multiple approvers, the last person to hit the publish button is the one that actually published the decision. That will not be true for NextGen. The first person who hits the publish button will publish the decision. So if you have a multi-unit or multi-jurisdictional fire and you have several approvers on it, this will require some coordination on your part outside of the WFDSS system, because whoever hits that button first publishes the whole thing. What we would recommend is that you communicate well with your partners, with other approvers for a decision, that you document that coordination in the rationale for your decision, and that between you, you agree on one person who will actually hit the button and publish the decision for the incident. Again, that is something that we are working at fixing the capacity to have multiple approvers on, but it will not be there at launch. Okay, the next one. So Ed hit some right off the bat on the risk and complexity analysis for an incident. That's the form is the PMS 236, so we have it shorthanded to that here. So WFDSS NextGen at launch will have several pieces of that. It will have the parts B, C, and D, which are the relative risk assessment, the organizational assessment, and the additional information for complex incident management that are part of that form at launch. We are working on adding the incident complexity level, which is part E of that as well, and that should be added shortly after launch. For fire analysis, at launch, NextGen will have fire spread probability, the FS Pro model, as the only fire modeling available in WFDSS NextGen. The Farsight and FlamMap models, which you may remember from Classic as your near-term and short-term fire behavior, will be added in the coming months. We are starting to work on those, but they will not be available when it launches. So in the meantime, that means that fire analysts will need to use the desktop versions of these models. We did do some work at trying to mitigate that by making it easier for anyone to load in screenshots and results from models outside of WFDSS into the application where you can include them in a decision. Another one, the incident history. So you may be familiar with the incident history in Classic. I kept a running list of updates to the incident, when they were done, and who was the person who did them. We will not have that at launch, but are working for that as a something to be added shortly after. This means that it will take a little more communication and coordination because you may have multiple people working in a decision and less ability to track exactly who is doing what. So again, time of transition, increased communication. And last one on the list here, system messages and notifications. So you may recall from Classic, if there was a decision waiting for your approval in WFDSS, you would get a notification, an email, a text message. We will not have that ability in NextGen at launch. That is one that we are working on, but again, was not available for launch day. So once more, the workaround there is communication. Coordinate with the people who are working on an incident to try and touch base and make sure that they know they need to tell you when things are ready, and you need to tell them when you are ready to approve something. Okay, to help communicate all of this, we will be making release notes available as we get new features added to the application, and we will continue to communicate with everyone about new features that are coming out, all of this to try and help keep your situational awareness up. But please do be aware and patient with the team as we continue to build the application. Okay, last slide, please. Thank you. And that communication is two-way. So we want to hear from you about the application. What features, we want you to know kind of what features we're working on and what we're planning. And we also want you to give us feedback and be able to report problems as you find them. So this shows the WFDSS NextGen homepage and some of the links available on the left-hand side there. From here, you'll see kind of right toward the top, the What's New section, where we will post things about new functionality, and you can see release notes. There is a link to the known issues. As we find problems, we'll try and list them there and list any available workarounds for them until we can get them fixed. In the user support section, you'll find links to give us feedback on what you would like to see in the application and to report bugs. And under the WFDSS development heading, you can learn kind of more about where we're at in the development process. We definitely want to hear from you. As agency administrators, WFDSS is really your tool for getting the information you need to make a risk-informed decision, to document those risk-informed decisions, and to communicate your decision on fire. So please, please, please share your input. And with that, that is the end of my section. Morgan?
Thank you, Rick. We have a couple questions in the chat that we suspect many people have the same question. And since we are running a little bit ahead, I'm going to turn it over to Sarah to just answer those live. Sarah, could you summarize the question and then give the answer here? I don't hear you if you need to unmute.
I was double muted. All right. So the first question that I'm going to respond to is from Natalie Kelly, and asking about understanding there is no reviewer role, just collaborators in NextGen, which is true. And so we do have the application roles, which Sam talked about earlier. So viewer, editor, fire behavior analyst, geographic area editor, and support. And as we talked about, almost 100% of you will be assigned or appropriate to have that editor role. So those are system roles, but we also have incident privileges. And just to clarify those, so anyone who interacts with decision content, including analysis or uploading shapes or things like that, will need to be specified as a collaborator. And Rick showed where that was. So once someone is assigned as a collaborator, and you can have as many as you want or as few as you want. Yep, right there, edit collaborators. They will be able to help provide support and decision content, shapes, and analyses. So everybody's a collaborator as you add them. That's how they get in here. But once you're a collaborator, you also can be assigned as the approver or the point of contact, and you see those below the name. So point of contact, there'll always be one. And that's really kind of the lead collaborator, maybe used to be considered incident editor or incident owner. And that person in the future may have some responsibilities about being able to send the decision for approval. Right now, anyone who is a collaborator can edit the point of contact and make themselves the point of contact or make someone else the point of contact. And that approver box, you can only click that for folks who have self-certified on their profile page that they are qualified to be an approver based on their agency requirements. So you have to be a collaborator. You can be the point of contact, but only one. And then you can be an approver, but only if you've got that set in your profile. One thing I'm going to add in here is that fire behavior analysts, geographic area editors, and the support role are all implicit collaborators. So they have the ability to go into any incident nationwide and help you manage your collaborators list. If you're stuck and you need to, you're about to get on a helicopter or something like that, and you need to have somebody go in and change the approver or add another collaborator, you can reach out to your geographic area editor and they can go in and help you manage this list. They can also help you manage your incident content. And the same is true of fire behavior analysts. They don't have to be added explicitly by name to be able to create or respond to an analysis request. They just can. And hopefully they've communicated with you prior to doing so. So that's what I wanted to cover on that one. Does anybody else have anything that they wanted to say about that?
We had from Tanya that, oh, sorry, I was already moving us ahead.
No, that's, if that answered that one.
If it doesn't, can you just, Natalie or others, put in the chat how we can clarify.
Okay, we can, was there another one?
Yes, Tanya.
So Tanya's question. Tanya wants to know, so can we clarify really how moving from WFDSS Classic to WFDSS NextGen will work? And I think I might lean on Rick or Morgan a little bit about this based on how we use the same bucket in FAMOF. But there's no communication between the systems. So there's no way for us physically to import all the users from WFDSS Classic into WFDSS NextGen. However, back in December, we had to make some changes with the way that folks authenticated into WFDSS Classic. And so they have the beginnings of an account with WFDSS NextGen because we share the same bucket. They do not necessarily have viewers, the viewer role, but everyone will need to request a role in production using FAMOF.
I will maybe add one thing to that, Tanya. If you have any new users, anyone, if you request a viewer role for NextGen production, it will be granted. That's an auto grant thing. So even if you have new users, as soon as they request that, they can get in and view the GAE list to see who they need to contact about other roles.
That's right, Rick. Thank you. And then I can jump down to Diane's question, just confirming that FS Pro is not automated at this time, and that is correct. And Rick did answer that. And the last question I see is from Rich Sack. Do we have to wait for production launch to request roles? And no. So again, you'll only request one role because they're hierarchical and they build on other roles. So really folks are just going to want to request that editor role. We've got a couple hundred pending requests sitting and waiting. And as Sam said earlier, those role requests won't be processed until we transition. And based on the number that we have waiting, we're going to have to prioritize those areas that are more likely to have active fire incidents. And so the RD&A will help support the geographic area editors in getting those roles processed. But that will happen at that point. So we can't have more than one WFDSS. There shall be only one. So going forward, as soon as the 26 hits, we will start approving those roles.
Okay, thank you, Sarah. Please keep putting messages in the chat, and if we have time, we'll answer them verbally, and where it's appropriate, answer back to everybody in the chat. I'm going to move us on to Wes Hall, who is going to give an overview here of how spatial fire planning works, because it is quite different than how it worked in Classic WFDSS. Go ahead, Wes.
Thank you, Morgan. Just checking again, you can hear me?
I got you. You sounded a little quiet for me.
Okay, I'll try to talk loudly. So as Sam mentioned earlier, for spatial fire planning, we have split that process out from the way it was developed in WFDSS Classic. So in WFDSS Classic, your fire planners would go in and manage your land and resource management plan language, fire management plan direction, that sort of thing directly in the application in WFDSS Classic. Moving on to NextGen, that process will be separate. So we have a sister application that launched very recently called the Spatial Fire Planning Service. You can see the image there on the screen. And that is now the application that will manage the land and resource management plan language, fire plan direction, that sort of thing, moving on into the future. The new system is interagency based, and so it's not just Forest Service or DOI information in there. We also have state and local data as well. The data was migrated from WFDSS Classic into the Spatial Fire Planning Service, so anything you had in WFDSS Classic was automatically migrated, and we've been working with units and GAEs to kind of go over the data and make sure the quality assurance and quality check that data, make sure it came through cleanly. We've had a few issues, but we've been able to remedy most of those, and we'll continue to do that throughout the fire season. So we also expanded those shapes. So in WFDSS Classic, the shapes were called your unit level direction, and then if you had spatial fire planning enabled, you had strategic objectives and management requirements. Moving into Spatial Fire Planning Service, the data is not as defined by the language, so to speak, as much as it is defined by the shape type. So we actually have 4 shape types. We have 2 subunit types, so within a single unit. Those are overlapping and non-overlapping shapes. This depends on the shape itself and whether it overlaps with another shape within that subunit. And then we have unit level shapes, so that is your jurisdictional unit boundary, so to speak. There's some nuances to that, but that's generally your unit boundary itself. And then we've added an additional 4th shape called multi-unit shapes. And this is to facilitate any language that maybe covers a partner unit of yours that you have an agreement with, or some language that applies to an entire zone, or even at the regional or geographic area level, and at the national level. So we have the ability to add higher level guidance when and if needed, now that we have multi-unit shapes. Go ahead and shift to the next slide. All right, so in the Spatial Fire Planning Service, the unit and regional level fire planners have direct access to the data, so it can be updated and changed at any time. In WFDSS Classic, we had periods of time where your fire planners would submit data to the RD&A, it would get processed and uploaded into the application. Moving to the Spatial Fire Planning Service, that puts that timeline in the hands of the fire planner. So if even mid-incident something's coming through and it's old and it doesn't make sense, you can go into the Spatial Fire Planning Service and amend that data, fix the data, so that in your subsequent decisions during the incident, you have the correct data flowing into the system. The Spatial Fire Planning Service feeds its data directly into NextGen. So NextGen is a consumer of the service, not an editor of the service. Next slide. The way that it comes into WFDSS NextGen is that it's offered in the map as a reference layer, so it can be accessed at any point in time. And then when an incident decision is started, the Spatial Fire Planning Service data is clipped by the planning area. So that data is referenced directly within the planning area. And then it's used in the strategic assessment, which is objectives in WFDSS Classic, and used in the strategic course of action, which of course was course of action in WFDSS Classic. So that data comes in, same mechanisms it does in WFDSS Classic. It's just a different sister application that's now feeding the service to NextGen. And that's all I have, I believe, but I can answer questions if there is any.
Yeah, since we have a few moments, we can wait and see if something pops into the chat. Okay, I don't see anything yet, but go ahead and put it in the chat if you do have a question, and Wes and team will tackle it in the chat. And now we're going to move to a high-level overview of the different components of the system, and Sam is going to lead us through that. Go ahead, Sam.
Sorry, I was double muted there.
Yeah, there you go. I got you.
We're going to step through the system kind of at a high level. We're going to go relatively quickly, but I am going to slow down in some of the parts where we've had some changes that Rick kind of glanced over as well. Okay, so go ahead to the next slide, Morgan. We'll kick off with profile. So we've talked about this a couple times. You can check this in EDU, and when you're able to get into production the first time, you're going to want to make sure you check that approver box. And then you're going to want to also make sure, just like in Classic, that you keep all this information up to date. The only data that's coming over from INAP is going to be your name and your primary email. Everything else in your user profile is going to be self-populated. So for other users to be able to find you properly, make sure that all your information is correct in here. Okay, next slide, Morgan. Okay, so first things first, and we do have some recordings of this, so please do get on some of those help resources. You can get to them from the homepage link that Morgan has put in the chat. But the first thing you're going to want to do is initiate a record. So by initiating a record, we mean starting a decision. So you would click on an incident in that right-hand panel. It's going to open up the incident details panel that you can see there on the right-hand side. And if you're sure that's the correct incident, then you can press that decision button. And that'll take you to the decision if it's already been started. And if it has not been started, you'll be prompted to start the decision. Okay, go ahead to the next slide, Morgan. So a couple things that happen once you start a decision. And Diane alluded to this too. We're doing a lot of automated stuff in here. And we're doing that so that we can get you the information as fast as possible. In the future, we will be adding things like automated FS Pro runs. What we're doing on an automated, from an automated point of view right now, is we're just creating an automated planning area. And then we're using that planning area to clip a lot of your spatial data and give you a spatial inventory. Doing that spatial inventory lets us give you a lot of derived products as well. So I mentioned earlier, we were bringing in services from like the RMA dashboard, like your SDI, snag hazard, and PCL is in there. And by clipping that with your planning area, we'll be able to break that information down and give you some charts like the one you see in the center there. And we're going to be adding layers to that spatial inventory as we can, and then putting those charts through the application over the next year. So keep your eye out for that. Spatial inventory, if you decide to redraw your planning area, you will need to regenerate the spatial inventory to change those charts. And I believe we have some of that in the recording as well that goes through the whole decision process. You can also download that spatial inventory with the little Excel icon that you'll see in the upper right hand of your spatial inventory. Okay, next slide. Okay, so the way everything is working in WFDSS NextGen, and you can kind of see it in the image on the right, everything's going to go left to right, top to bottom. So you can use that stepper on the very top. You'll start an incident information, and then there will be sub-tabs on your right-hand panel that you can step through. So when you get to analysis, there's only two tabs there. There's existing analysis and new analysis. And so because we're not doing the automated FS Pros right off the bat, if you need an FS Pro right away, you can click on the analysis tab, you'll go to new analysis, select FS Pro, and then in the bottom right-hand corner, you'll see a request analysis. So you'll request that, you'll put in a note, submit it, and then it'll go into the queue. You will need to reach out to your GAE probably, who will know who the fire behavior analysts are, because as Rick mentioned, we're not doing notifications right now. We haven't got to that part. So it's going to require some coordination to make sure that that request doesn't just sit there. So it's not going in a queue anywhere. So be as explicit as you can in that request. And again, make sure your contact information is good so that if an analyst needs to get back to you with questions on your analysis, they can reach you. Another thing I'll say on this slide here is this is a slight change, kind of just a different way of doing it than in Classic. In Classic, you had that modeling section in your decision. That's been moved here, and that's the analysis summary. You can upload images in this rich text editor. So if you did a FLAM map run or had a FLAM map run done outside of the system or short-term fire behavior at far site, and you want to use that in your decision, you can just take a screen capture of that and you can upload it here in the analysis summary. Analysis summary will be a required field for your decision when we do get to the system validation part. So you'll have to upload that picture in here, write a little bit about your analysis summary, and then save. And the fire behavior analyst can do that for you as well. But someone has to do it. One other thing I'll mention before we go to the next section, and you'll see this in every section that's going to be validated by the system in version 1.1. And that's that ready for publication button that you can see at the bottom of that screen capture on the right. And ready for publication basically locks that screen. It's analogous to the check-in, and it's actually also analogous to the review part in WFDSS Classic. So once you lock that section, nobody can change it until you unclick ready for review. And in the future, when we are doing the system validation, you'll have to lock at each section before you can send the decision for approval. So that's how the review process is going to be working in WFDSS NextGen. Okay, Morgan, go ahead to the next. So going left to right, the next section is relative risk. And this follows the PMS 236. And we did break everything out in WFDSS NextGen by element. So in WFDSS Classic, it's broken out by section, probability, value, hazard. And in WFDSS NextGen, we broke it out by those big sections, but we also broke out each element. And many users were doing that already, but this makes it very explicit and it's easier to rate it and see exactly what's tied to each element. And you're able to upload images now because it's a rich text editor. Oh, one other thing before we go to the next slide, the ready for publication on relative risk needs to be checked before this section can be pushed to your organization assessment. So in the past, in Classic, you would have had to publish your relative risk. In WFDSS NextGen, you need to mark it ready to publish. So you won't be able to publish relative risk and org assessment independently. They're part of your decision. But in order to push your relative risk to the org assessment section so that you can start it, you have to click that ready for publication to lock it. Okay, Morgan, go ahead. Okay, the next section. This is what in Classic would have been labeled as your objectives and requirements section. It's titled Strategic Assessment because it's a little bit more expansive than objectives and requirements. This is where we have tied ISAP process as an option to your objectives and requirements. However, you don't have to use it. So if you have a workflow that works for you in WFDSS Classic, you can continue to use that workflow here in NextGen. The only thing that's required in this section is a protection objective. That's all you need to do to move on. And that protection objective can be tied to your entire planning area if you'd like. I believe that's all I have for here. We do some deep dives into strategic assessment, and it's hard to do that not in the application. So I'd encourage you to attend office hours or refer to any of the recordings we have if you have more questions on strategic assessment. And we can circle back to this after we finish this section as well. Go ahead, Morgan. Okay, so the next section is the course of action. Course of action has had some enhancements in WFDSS NextGen. So it's now spatially explicit. Technically, your course of action has always been spatially explicit. It's tied to your planning area. That's why you drew a planning area. But now we'll let you get a little bit more nuanced should you choose to in WFDSS NextGen. So you could have multiple courses of action tied to different shapes in your planning area. This fire that I screen captured here is from the Horton fire in Arizona. And for their course of action, mainly what they were describing is this pod boundary that you see highlighted, which is one of the options to tie your course of action to. You can also tie your course of action to any of the spatial fire planning layers. So your strategic objective shapes or your management requirements, even the unit level shapes. And if you're in Alaska, you could use the multi-unit strategic objectives. So you are also required to break out the course of action and then get a little bit more into the details of the current fire situation and your desired outcome, and then the strategic comparison. And the intent here is so that you don't need to outline alternatives. You can outline what went into your decision to choose a particular fire suppression strategy for your fire, and why you eliminated other fire suppression strategies in lieu of what you chose to do. The way this course of action is going to work, it's kind of a top to bottom cookie cutter. So you can only have one course of action in a particular area. And there's a list on the bottom in course of action. And whichever one's on the top, that's your primary. So that's on the top of your cake there. And then you're looking straight down through all the rest. And how that comes out in a functional capacity is that image there on the right. So it'll break your planning area down by different strategies. So this is the breakdown for, I believe this is for the Horton fire. And we'll also break it down based on area burned. So we'll take your fire perimeter if you have one uploaded, and we will query that against your courses of action to tell you how much of your fire perimeter is in a particular course of action. And then we're going to let you report that strategy should you choose to Irwin. You don't have to. There's a box there that allows you to click it and say, do not report your strategy to Irwin. If you choose to report this strategy to Irwin, we have been talking to 209 and they are interested in pulling strategy from Irwin. And And because we have a higher ADS for strategy in Irwin, if you were to report this to Irwin, your strategy as you have it outlined in WFDS would then populate the 209. But that's a future enhancement. So for now, where that reported strategy would go is just into Irwin. And any applications reading Irwin strategy, that's where that information would show up. And I'm going to pause there for any questions because that is a change.
Yeah, Sam, you got a couple questions in the chat on that on this slide.
Okay. Let me scroll down in my chat here. Who's the first question, Casey?
Pick Arthur. It says, curious how this works. Define contain can also be a full suppression strategy.
Yep. All 4 of the 209 strategies are suppression strategies. So your choices in the 209 and really NWCG strategies are monitor, confine, contain, point zone, full suppression. And so we're going to use those same strategies. And at some point, if NWCG were to update those strategies to a different group of strategies, 209 would start using those and we would as well. So this allows us to use the same strategies that populate the 209. But they're all suppression strategies. Okay, and then can I explain how the spatially explicit course of action would integrate or different from management action points? Sure, so management action points aren't going to be in WFDS NextGen. And the reason is because having a spatially explicit course of action basically substitutes for management action points. In that when the fire leaves a particular area, let's say you had a management action point and it was, if the fire burns to the south of this ridge, we are going to do XYZ. Well, that should be covered by your course of action. All you would do is use that ridge as the divider. And on one side of the ridge, you might have a particular course of action. When it crosses the ridge, change your course of action. And it could be the same strategy, but there may be a different course of action on the other side of the ridge. So it could still be full suppression, but perhaps you're going to use an indirect strategy or something like that on the other side of the ridge. So I'm not sure if that got at your question, Natalie, or not. Did that answer your question? Okay. Okay. Yes, there'll be some crosswalks in the help, Nolan. We're making that content management the help right now. And so if there are any particular points of confusion, make sure you get those to us and we can help get those into the help content as well. And there'll be little question marks like in WFDS Classic next to some of these things that you can click on and get some help inside the application. And so we're doing those as we go. I believe those are already working in relative risk, org assessment, and we're currently working on the spatial or strategic assessment. And I think we're going to have a course of action content management up pretty soon.
So whoever didn't see that chat, that was the MAPs and then whatever other term was
Yeah.
needed
to the course of action.
Yep. A couple more in there.
So I see Dale's question. Yep, so they can be tied to a course of action polygon, or the planning area boundary, as Morgan says there. So you can do it for the whole planning area, or you could do one course of action for the entire planning area, and then maybe you have one particular point zone protection for a historic cabin inside there. And you can do that too. What about non-mappable situational MAPs? So non-mappable would just apply to your entire planning area. So I would say those would go in your strategic assessments. Let's say there's a safety issue, or you have something where you want to inform people for evacuations or communication. You could tie those to a strategic assessment. Okay. I don't see any more questions in this part. So let's go to the next slide, Morgan. So the next part of your strategy is the cost. This is very similar to WFDSS Classic. A couple enhancements we're still working on is displaying the Irwin estimated cost to date. That's not functional right now, but it'll be in a release probably this summer. And then we did add an additional download for the ISAP cost estimator, and that'll just download that most recent Excel spreadsheet for ISAP. You do have to enter a narrative for cost, and I'll also point out that SCI went away in WFDSS NextGen. That's no longer supported by the Fire Lab. They are working on a new tool, but we're not sure when that'll be out. Okay, so your next tab to the right is going to be your org assessment. And the reason we put org assessment after strategy is that there are some specific questions in the org assessment related to the strategy that you're implementing. And so it makes sense to do that after you know what you're doing. In order to get your relative risk to populate in here, like I mentioned earlier, you have to mark that ready for publication. And we have a kind of a validation in org assessment so that you don't forget to do that. The first time you go into org assessment, it'll remind you to go back to your relative risk and click that ready for publication so that you can start populating it. Very similar to relative risk, we're using the PMS 236, and we are in the process of updating this to be consistent with the one that was released last June. So it'll look a little bit different later this summer, in that it'll have that Part E integrated. For now, though, it's just the Part C and the Part D. And the way this works in WFDSS NextGen is if a CIMT is either recommended or chosen. So if the tally recommends it, or in your unit, if you choose a CIMT, you'll have to do that Part D. And we'll let you know if you haven't done the Part D. If you try to mark this section ready for publication and you haven't done a Part D, a little error message will pop up and tell you to do that. So then you have to scroll back up to the top and go to the right to do your Part D. And very similar to relative risk, this also has the rich text editor, which will allow you to upload images as well. Not PDFs though, just JPEGs, PNGs. I think we take IMGs and TIFF files that you can load in there. So if you had a PNG or something you wanted to upload and it was just a single page, and you wanted to put it in there for reference, you could screen capture that as a JPEG and then add it in as an image if you wanted to.
You got 1 minute, Zane.
Sure. Next. Okay. So rationale. This is very similar to WFDSS Classic. So this is the summary of your decision. 2 required fields here. Your leader's intent is, and then any triggers if you need those. Those are both required fields, and then you can save and mark that ready for publication. And then the final part is the decision approval. Rick mentioned this, and I'll just touch on it real quick. Since we don't have the system validation, you will actually have to manually validate that you're done with all these sections. There's nothing in the system to check it. So if you click on all these on and go through the process to publish the decision, and nothing's been put in those sections, they'll just be empty in the PDF. I think that's about it. That's all I had.
Okay, thanks, Sam. As you think of questions, please use the chat, and we'll have a few minutes at the end here to address as many of them as we can. I'm going to talk for just a few minutes here about ISAP, RMA, and WFDSS. ISAP is the Incident Strategic Alignment Process, and RMA is the Risk Management Assistance Dashboard. So many of you that have been AAs the last few years probably have experience with ISAP, as many Type 1 and Type 2, and now the CIMTs are using that, the process. The ISAP team, the RMA dashboard team, and WFDSS, we will continue to work together to ensure that the applications and processes are integrated and support each other, and that the expectations are clear between what is needed where. So to that end, we have updated the ISAP, RMA, WFDSS talking points for 2025, and that is the link that I just put into the chat. This takes into account the improvements and changes that were made with NextGen WFDSS and ISAP. And I will just touch on a few of those here, but for more details, use that link I put in the chat. That's the full talking points document. So the main points to take away from that document, though, are that agency administrators' decisions around management of wildfire need to be documented in NextGen WFDSS. WFDSS is the decision of record system, and all other tools and resources augment and inform that decision. If there is something that influenced your decision as an AA, whether it is an analytical tool or a strategic risk discussion, if it influenced your decision, you should make it part of the official record in WFDSS, and you should make sure that that decision gets approved and published. Strategic risk tools and discussions, including the ISAP and RMA dashboard, can help inform that. So those that are familiar with ISAP, again, it's a strategic planning effort that it's embedded in many of the team's processes. From their end, they've shared that formal ISAP process is not required, but discussions around the 4 ISAP pillars is strongly recommended, and the teams lead that effort. The strategic planning meetings do not need to be open to the public or the media. And the ISAP discussions, the goal there is to result in an alignment around what the incident responders are doing and what the agency administrators and the IMT members share in consistent messaging for the internal and external audiences. Noting that there's items of concern or influence from ISAP discussions in WFDSS increases the longevity and the relevancy of your WFDSS decision and those related conversations. So please make sure you're keeping your WFDSS decision updated as needed based on what the team is working on and guiding through the ISAP process. I also want to say another thing here, that the ISAP process itself is going through some growing and working to move towards a standardization with NWCG. And in the interim, while that is making its way through the proper channels, that ISAP might look a little different depending on what team you have as they adopt standards and the things are more defined. So one experience you have with ISAP with a team, it could look a little different, but they're working to get some standards and move through those NWCG processes so that it is consistent everywhere that's used. And so that is all I had to share on ISAP. And we have a Q&A section before we turn it over to that, because we anticipate perhaps more questions than we have time to answer. We're going to turn it back to Sarah, who is going to remind everyone how to get help offline from this call, and then Casey will facilitate our questions.
Okay, I am unmuted. So yep, just following back along, we're also doing a lot of other things in the background to help bring users along with us in getting help. And so some of you may have gotten our second newsletter today, and we'll drop the link in the chat to be able to access that. And within that, this I guess this bi-monthly, bi-weekly, same, every 2 weeks, we'll try and send these out if we can. And this topic is about transition, how to prepare for transition and things like that. So along with the newsletter, we have weekly office hours, which will continue weekly as long as they're needed. And focusing on specific topics. So this week, tomorrow, they'll be every Wednesday from 13 to 1400 Mountain. And this week, we'll be talking about transition tomorrow. And then we'll follow up next week, and we'll tie back into the strategy that Sam just talked about. And that's a good place to come in to ask questions about that. Here it is. Can I just steal the screen, Morgan?
Yes, and I will stop sharing if that helps it.
Okay. Great. So that should be coming up, and you should see this is a copy of that this is our newsletter. And so we've got some information, what will happen on March 26th to each of the systems. So we know that this is Classic and this is WFDSS NextGen. And then down here, how can you prepare? And so we have a lot of active links on this. Check out our frequently asked questions, which we continue to update based on sessions just like this. Our library of user support videos. So that's our YouTube. And also we have a link to, excuse me, the location of where this particular video will show up. Down here, we've had already 3 weeks of office hours. So you can watch the recordings here. And I've got documented what the topics of those were. And then here's the next 3. And so each of these you'll have to register individually because the platform that we use doesn't allow us to have a reoccurring invitation. So those are great ways to get help. And again, I'm just going to go to NextGen Help. Here's the help system in and of itself. And what I didn't maybe mention earlier is that if you've got a topic that you're interested in and you don't want to have to go through the user guide and click on try and find it, you can search using the search box, and it'll bring up all of the associated topics. So if you're looking for roles, you can zip right to roles. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing. So that is, you can also, at the top of the newsletter, it says join our mailing list, join our email list. And it does say add your email to University of Idaho, and that is the correct place. They are our partners in this, and they help us with this content newsletter. So with that, I think we can open it up to other folks. Any other questions about anything?
Yeah, thanks, Sarah. Also, I want to make sure we circle back on Dale's question. Sam, can you talk a little bit more on the MAPs for non-mappable situations?
Well, there are no more MAPs in WFDSS NextGen, but I think what he's getting at is MAPs that might have applied to the entire planning area, to the incident as a whole. And so if you have some sort of action that needs to occur, you could add those as a course of action for your entire planning area, or you could put them in as a strategic assessment for your planning area.
Natalie asked, can you view a draft PDF of the decision prior to submitting, like in that older WFDSS?
You won't be able to do that initially with 1.0, but yes, that is planned functionality. When we release the system automated validation and the multiple approvers, there will be a preview of the decision as well.
Okay, question. Sarah, will editor roles in EDU be transferred over to production after March 26th?
It's going to be GA by GA. That's going to be up to your geographic area editor. And I see that Bill Edwards said in the GAE staff report, only contexts for Eastern, Southern Alaska, and Northwest are listed. So it's the geographic area editor information got wiped out when we connected to Irwin OAT so that we could create new incidents for you guys to use in training situations. So the GAEs are going to need to update their information in EDU. And as they do that, you should be able to find that information in EDU. Your other option is to go to WFDSS Classic and look up your GAE.
I did want to show how the controls at the bottom of the list work. So both of the user search and the GA staff report have controls at the bottom where you can filter how many items per page, and you can see how many records are returned. So the default is only 10, but we do have 30 in there that have, and so that's about a third of what we should have. And then each of these columns can be sorted by the column header. So if you're looking for any individuals, and so the search users works very similarly. If I just search for all the users that are in here, I only get page 10 that comes back. But if I expand that, I get all of them. So I just wanted to share that they're kind of hidden at the bottom of the page, especially if you've got a small monitor.
Is the RIST RD&A support form link available at the NextGen home?
It's not currently, but I believe it will be.
Put that link back on there. Request that X. I think I don't see any more questions in there. I know we gave you guys a lot of information, and some of you, this is the first time seeing NextGen. So make sure you reach out for those resources and get on the Wildfire Learning Portal and register for the certificates. So you can do the required feedback form. There's 3 questions and it'll auto-generate your certificate. But I just want to thank everybody for their time. We covered a lot, so thank you. But yeah, please reach out if you have any questions.